remember how she went into the presence of somebody. I don't know who it was. It was highly glorified, I know that, according to her own computer. But I'm sure it was staged for effect, if you know what I mean, because they wanted to make an impression. And the sixth level is a little dramatic in some ways, because they know what will impress a human. And they had a reason for doing it, and
for making the impression.
Right, but even still, he was an older member, and she didn't come in real close contact with him. But she was in the same area where he was. But that is very rare. And I'm sure it was for a reason. I don't know what it was. Probably. I should write a book about it.
Might have been.
Probably felt like she would have the ability to do it because they can see into the future. They know what's in store for that individual.
What was your question, Terry?
I just wanted to make a comment when we were talking about love and etc. There was just recently an article in the Sunday paper about conversation being the most important thing in a marriage. And they took a poll, various polls on it, and various people had said that yes, conversation was more important than sex in their life, and that also the ability to be able to laugh with their mate was very important too. And I thought it was a good article that leads us hopefully to getting away from this point.
Okay. Wait, just for sake of procedure, when we're talking to you with questions and answers, we try to keep you from quoting our things that you've read. Or articles too.
Could be wrong, but Steve and Ted said that a week back one of the things we might do is work with the newer graduates. And then I listened to a tape not too long ago and he said, you wouldn't be, is what I got. Since we would be in a new vehicle, you wouldn't be working with us.
No, don't believe so. I don't believe we said you wouldn't be. And do you know what he's talking about? What's he talking about, then?
I think you're on that touch that you wouldn't work with the new graduates because they'd be too far below you.
That's what we said.
The older graduates.
They said there were about, we're not sure, but we used as an example 3 levels below you, 3 levels of graduates closer to you are, and then 3 levels into the next level. That's what we were
So that didn't
about.
register. You didn't listen to that carefully enough. Or you would have seen that difference, because I think we made it clear on the tape.
Let's get your question. It's your question. Don't know why you keep your hands down there.
Recently, you mentioned one of the questions you could bring up is what it links to in the circumstances. I know I've had questions. I've got 2 questions. The right question, that's my question about. It's just maybe my vehicle in trying to examine a question while bringing up the meeting. Feeling like it's petty or it's not a significant question. Right now I want to know what your questions are, but I've got little questions that I like to, I would ask, but I'm often feel awkward in wondering if it's appropriate to bringing something up and asking about it, feeling that it's not.
The only way you learn that is trial and error.
Okay, I'm going to try. Let's say you're writing a note, circumstance the other day, we were writing a note about the cue card, about some work we had done. And we told you about, we had a rough idle problem. And the bottom line of the rough idle problem was we found a problem with the brake booster, the vacuum. But we also did a lot of other things in troubleshooting, trying to find out what the problem was. And in the process, we found something else might have been the problem, we blocked it off. for a few minutes we discussed whether it was right to, whether we need to go all into that.
In the note?
Yes, or should we just say, well, we found the problem and this is what we did and I'll let you know. And it's like, I had a feeling and I didn't know if it was right up in my vehicle, just like, I wanted Links to know all the steps that we went through and if we had disconnected or blocked something off that was normally part of the engine, even though Links may not, whether I know if Links really tuned into all that, I want them to know that what we went through so that in the future if something came up and we said, well, we did that when we did such and such, and said, well, we never heard about that.
Well,
And then forgetting that, well, what seems so insignificant to tell Links about it, but in retrospect you see that, well, I should let Links know everything.
well, it's best, the only reason that it's best for you at this point to cover your bets and say those steps that you went through as briefly as you can state them is because you don't know if you can be trusted on what to leave out and what to put in. In other words, you don't know exactly what's right to put in, what's right to leave out. In theory, we don't need to know all that stuff. As long as you didn't change anything. As long as you didn't take another engine out of another car and stick it in this one and leave S-car out of commission, but now Q-car works fine. As long as you didn't disable something else or have to go spend some money or you didn't jerry-rig something and you came up with a solution, then in theory we don't need to know any of those details. But since when in doubt, it's best to go ahead and, as briefly as you can, write up those details. You follow that? Because you're just learning on which ones you can leave out. Because invariably, if you say you don't need to say that, just say the end thing. Invariably, you'll leave out just the ones that will say, "Goodness, how could you have left that out?" Yeah.
Then later, when we find out about it, you say, well, we told you about it. Really, what you did was just talk about it, putting it in the
and
notes.
thought about it.
You know. So it doesn't do any harm to let us know. And if your notes get to be pages long, then we'll talk to you about how to write a note.
Now, I tell you where you need to leave things out in note writing. And that is when you're writing something that you went through, and you're writing like a suspected strike thing, and your mind went through a period of involving itself in recollection too much of things that were inappropriate for it. Now, the reason it's very harmful to state all the gory details of how you got off the track in your suspected strike of yourself is you're digging all those things up again. And you're playing that negative tape again in order to express it. So in that way, you have to package it in one little phrase that just simply tells a description and a label of the kind of thing you got caught in. But you're doing yourselves and us a disservice. We feel like we have to wallow through the mud with you when you tell us all the gory details that you went through that you shouldn't have gone through in your thinking. You follow that?
Make it simple, like good, wet. That's it, you know.
Would it be possible for, let's say we get back to the next level, and a classmate or classmates to eventually become older members to other classmates? Like, for example, in your, that you talked about, the level 3 says to level 2, well, I've noticed so-and-so, and he's really moving along, let's move him up a notch. I suppose that individual really zooms on up, and he's up the line as compared to, let's say, other classmates. Then would he, at such time, be an older member, possibly, to a former class member? Would that situation occur?
You want to answer?
Well, yes, you would. Now, but older members don't always mean a giant leap. Older member isn't always, do you follow that? Older member is not always a giant leap. An older member is, and also an older member can have, might have very little difference as far, now you're zeroing in on labels that we use like older members. Like you might, let's say someone who has had some experience and has proven themselves in a certain area can perform a function with someone else as an assignment as if they were an older member, because in essence they are an older member in that area. Now if it gets into if that task gets into a broader scope of areas than what the assignment is, then there's going to have to be a larger gap between the older member and the individuals they're working with. This is why our area with you is so broad that we had to be older members. We couldn't be close to you because there are too many aspects of this task that we had to know how older members would act or respond to. Do you follow that?
There are so many, you can learn one aspect of a task that might make you an older member to the ones you're working with. But then you could be moved to another area that would make you less than the others. But the most important thing is that you have somebody looking out for you. Always. No one minds competition. There's no competition. Their desire is strictly to help you to become better members.
Yeah, their eyes are not on somebody else, and they wouldn't even have a consciousness of I'm moving faster than so-and-so, you know.
Actually, it's kind of hard to, you can excel by exerting a lot of effort. In other words, we have tried to instill in you to do the best that you can in everything. And if you do that when you go back to the next level, you can't help but excel. And because the more experience, if you do all the things we ask you to do, if you're given a task, do it as quickly as possible and do it to the best of your ability and as close to procedure as you possibly can. Remember, don't do a task and bypass procedures, because all you're doing is accomplishing the task, right? So what you want to do is do everything according to the procedures. And this goes with everything, from the way you consume, from the way you, your countenance, from the way you do your out-of-craft task, from the way you vacuum the floor, in every way, from the way you do your vital signs, from the way you do your supply runs, just everything. It isn't just once in a while when you think about it. It has to be instilled into your brain. And if you do all of those things, when you get to the next level, there will be no gap. And you will have a running jump on a lot, depending upon how much effort you have exerted. And therefore, you can move ahead in different departments. But as soon as you get to a certain place, they would probably move you to another department.
That would open all
another
kinds.
area that will open them, but somebody would be watching, whether it will be us or somebody else. But I can guarantee you, if you're showing the effort to do everything quickly and according to procedure and everything, that there will be no way that you will be held back. No way at all.
How you deal with your handicap is one of the most important ways that you can show effort. Now, do you understand what I mean by that? Because all of you have handicaps with your vehicle. all of the areas that your vehicle prevents you from being exactly where a next level member would be, those are all handicaps. Those are all handicaps. Now, sometimes desire gets you more credit in your next level vehicle than accomplishment. And the reason for that is that some of your accomplishment mechanisms aren't as good as others. Can you follow that? Actually, if you have a handicap in accomplishment, in application of accomplishment in change of your effort, if you have a handicap in the machinery of accomplishment, and as a result of it, your desire grows even stronger because of the handicap in the area of accomplishment, you're still developing that category in your new vehicle. Can you all follow that? Does everybody follow that? Because this is very important that you understand that. So you can't ever fairly judge yourself by your accomplishment of your desired effort in certain areas. Now, it's very, very disheartening to you if you're working so hard in a certain area and you seem to make so little progress. Or if you make some progress for a while and you're so pleased that you've made some progress, and then you see that for a while, in spite of your effort, you don't seem to be making any progress, or you even think you're regressing. Now, there comes the big test. What do you do in that? Does your desire become stronger, or do you give in to defeat? Do you give in to say, well, this is just an area that I can't handle? Because it's very easy to fall into that. Or do you continue to develop the effort in that area in spite of the capacity to materialize a performance that can be evaluated? Does that make sense? Do you all know what we're talking about? Huh? Already?
There's sometimes when I feel like when I've watched film scripts or whatever on people with cerebral palsy, where it's obvious from the efforts that they make in speech or whatever they're doing that there's nothing wrong with the brain. I mean, they know what they want to say, but it's
can't get it out.
yes, they can't move it. And like at times I feel like either I know the answer, I know the way to do it, but it's like looking at a vehicle like that. I just can't break through some kind of a block.
But what do you do then?
Well, I just keep pushing, and it feels like frustration, but eventually I'll get to a place where I think I should have been able to do that faster.
Okay.
I should have been able to do that
Well,
better.
but I should have is negative.
Mm-hmm.
I should have is crying over what I didn't do. And so you're going to say, I can do better than this. Now let's take your illustration of cerebral palsy is a very, very good example. Because you take someone that is severely handicapped with cerebral palsy, and the ones who have good little identities are ones that are just going to give absolutely everything they have, and they're never even going to say, this is the best I can speak. Even if after 3 more years, with all they have, they improve their speech just a little more, you can tell that it took tons of effort to get that little more. Now, and it's the same way with you. It's exactly the same way with the handicaps that you deal with your vehicles. But you've got to be very, very careful here that you don't slip into a cop-out and say, well, I must have one of those vehicles that's so handicapped in its performance areas. Because anytime you accept that that's your condition, then your effort is really going to wane. That's the reason you have to say, I am going to speak so you can understand me. And it's got to be just that much effort applied to whatever the handicap is of that your vehicle's dealing with you and getting next level ways through.
If I understand right, the vehicle is primarily the handicap, but are we not also handicapped, or maybe that's not the right word, me, my mind, my next level mind, is that also not handicapped to a certain degree?
How so?
Or is it also not handicapped?
Well, I'm going to answer your question and see if this is adequate. We feel like none were sent on this task who has not reached a point of age and growth enough to be able to accomplish this task with good colors. Do you follow that? Even though we don't know how to judge what good colors are. So therefore, your next level mind is not handicapped. Your next level mind is not handicapped. Because every one of you came in with one that was sufficient to do what was required of it in this task. You follow that? So that wasn't handicapped. In other words, you can't say, well, my next level mind, I could have been a newcomer, so much younger. I could have been on the borderline of those that they said, well, I got room for 3 more. And, and you can't, I'm sorry. Every one of you, we feel like that everyone who was sent on this task was adequately qualified. We may be wrong, but that's the way we feel. And but the task is you're improving also your desire, because that gives you effort. Once you recognize the value of next level ways, now that means once you really recognize the value of next level ways and all the restraints that go with it, restraints meaning in dealing with your handicap and your vehicle. And once you recognize the kind of positive thinking that you have to maintain in order to exercise those restraints and accomplish the end task, then you have nothing to do but pump desire from that point on. Sometimes the very thing that could, that a human would look at would do you in can be the very thing that can rescue you. Because what you're trying to do is end up with enough effort in these areas that are needed to drive that vehicle healthily. Do you follow that? So it's true that when it's like if the next level sees that you or when you were given this task, the very areas that are extremely difficult for you are giving you opportunity to advance in effort and desire for next level. Now, I know we've said all this before, but I don't know if the words mean to you what they mean to me when I say desire. Let's say that you're working on conquering something and you've made a little progress on it. And you felt so good for a little while because you felt like you were just about to have it under control. And then for a period you're not making such good progress. It even appears that you're maybe making progress in that area. Then there's got to be something deeper than the effort that you're applying that I'm calling desire. And that which is deeper says, that I have got to have. I've got to have it. Now what we're talking about is now here, talk about corny words. It's like purity. That's about the only word I can think of. Because I know when in the middle of the night, if I'm awake it seems like when I can see things best a lot of times is between 3 and 4 a.m. If I happen to be awake at that time, because somehow or other I don't know if my vehicle is on vacation, but I don't get much interference from it at that time. And but I know the vehicle has to be involved to a certain degree because I'm awake. Do you follow what I'm saying? But I know that I can crave. I mean crave. There's not anything that ever existed at the human level that can match the craving I get for arriving at a state of cleanliness. Cleanliness from from human things, from human actions, from human response. And that cleanliness is synonymous with that kind of purity. Now, and that wells up in me and I translate it as desire. And so I wake up with it, and as soon as I wake up and the night is over, and you wake up and you're back in the routine of the day, I can see that desire can wane if I'm not careful. I'll lose sight of what I craved so when I had my senses about it, because the routine of the day has gotten going again. And so what I try to do is recall how much I craved that. And when I want to recall it the most, it's when those temptations to pull me down in those weak areas come to me. That's when I want to play that tape again of what I felt at 3 a.m. when I craved that cleanliness and that purity. I knew how much better I would feel if I didn't have the weight of hanging on to those things that are still human responses. Can you all follow that? You should all be able to relate to that, and you should make yourself recall that craving for that at the times that you need it. What good does it do to think about it at 3 a.m., 3 to 4, and it was so great? Oh, did I ever crave it? Oh, nothing I love as much as that purity, but I forgot about it during the day, and my performance was so bad that when 3 a.m. got there again, I was craving it even more. Nothing was accomplished. It was wasted. So you have to actually make a mental note and say, I want to remember this feeling that I have at this time. The feeling, and bring it up into my conscious mind at those moments when I need it.
I think you said that there has to come a time when music was that our performance would meet your expectations. Something like that.
Performance?
Well, there's a better word. I know you used a better word, but that your expectations of our growth, let's say, would come. And I just feel like there's some kind of switch, like you talked about the blockage that's between the vehicle and the mind working, making the vehicle work.
That's right, there is.
I just wish I could reach up and
That's
hit
right.
that switch.
And you are. You're coming. And you're right, there is. There's a blockage there. And there's a blockage there, and there, and there, and there, and there, and there, and there. And here, yes, here, and here. And it's that blockage. It's the fact that you crave to abolish that blockage. Now, tomorrow, is your craving going to be less, or is it going to be greater? Because that's the all-important question. Because if it's a little weaker tomorrow and a little weaker the next day, you're going to slip right out of your task, ending up where you need to belong. Tomorrow, it's got to be stronger. You've got to, override's the best word I can think of. Now, and you've also got to say, now let's say, like, one thing that'll really do you in is if you say to yourself, I am not going to do something. Actually, and you have to say it. You know the reason you have to say it? You can't say, I'm going to try to do it. Because you know why? You know what the trouble is that comes with I'm going to try to do it?
Experience.
Well, there's an acceptance of I may not be able to. You're carrying along with that when you say I'm going to try to do it. you're carrying along a possibility that I may not be able to. So you say, I am going to do it. And you have to feel it down to your toenails. You have to absolutely feel it and be convinced that you're going to do it. Now, let's say if then, after meaning it all the way, you don't rise to the occasion in the way that you feel like you did. You feel like you flunked that very thing you said you were not going to flunk again. What are you going to do about it?
Try again.
No. Almost. What are you going to do?
I'm going to be determined to do it again.
Now that's right. Now you have to, and this is hard. This is hard because a human vehicle, particularly of the vintage of your vehicles, we don't mean the years of your. We're talking about the era of civilization, vintage. You are so programmed. Your vehicles are so programmed at this stage of civilized development that if I can't do something after so many serious tries, I might as well accept that I'm not going to make it in this area. That I'll work on the areas that I can make, and I'll try to forget that one's there, because that's just the way your vehicles work. Now, if you can actually realize that the payoff on the slot machine comes every time you give your all in an effort to move forward. Every time. That doesn't say up to 5 and then give up, or the 6th one, there's no more payoff. Now, and this takes some real adjustment, because you've got to say, well, how can I really be serious about saying I'm going to lift that problem when all I have to do is look at my history and see how many times I have not succeeded in that area? Who's going to be so stupid as to do that? You follow that? But then you've also got to say, now wait a minute, have I really applied the effort? You know, a lot of you say you're going to do it, but you are as schizophrenic when you say it as anything. It's like you're letting your vehicle is saying, okay, next level mind, I'll let you talk. I'll let you say you're going to do it. But wait till the next time I have you off, where you're off guard, and I'll show you who's going to win. Now, it doesn't say that to the vehicle, but it's keeping it in its consciousness, because you have not learned to carry with you that consciousness into the dark corners. You have got to learn to carry that consciousness into the dark corners.
Keep reinforcing it.
Well, no, I'm talking about carrying it into the dark corners means at the time that the vehicle has always been able to get away with what it wanted to get away with, that you've got to learn, because then it's a test of, am I going to step aside here at this point and let the vehicle get, and then I'm going to be the one who suffers? I mean, does it really mean that much to me to let that vehicle have its satisfaction? Does it really mean that much? Now, face up to that. You've got to face up to that. Does it, you should be so tired of being pulled apart by what your next level mind wants to do, and then occasionally what you let your vehicle get away with. And each time that it does that, you have to go through an agonizing experience of trying to recover. And just about the time you can take a decent breath again, your vehicle pulls it on you again. Now, which means that you haven't carried your next level mind into the dark corners. In other words, there are times of day, or there are certain circumstances where you find yourself in dark corners. And you can just about nail it down to either certain times of day or certain circumstances in those days where you are opened up for your vehicle getting control, and for your next level mind being permissive of it enough to let it do it. It's like you've got an ugly child that you just don't want to clamp down on so hard because you're afraid you might lose its love. No kidding. That's about the way you treat your vehicle. That I can only demand so much of that, of this vehicle, because it's not going to cooperate with me. In other words, even your next level mind is, in a sense, enjoying that human vibration. That's right. That's right. It's like a human enjoying getting in circumstances where he would get kicks from animal-type sensations. And humans do it. Don't kid yourself. Do you know what we're talking about? Humans will stoop to getting in circumstances where they enjoy animal sensations. And believe it or not, once they're that permissive with themselves to do it, they think they have found some of the greatest sensations that can be found. Are you all not aware of this? Don't you know this exists? Huh? Do you know what we're talking about?
I can't quite understand why the next level mind would enjoy the vehicle.
Well, you've still got a young next level mind, and you've still got a next level mind that can still relate to, in a subconscious way, relate to its past history. You are still vulnerable to those things. You still have weak areas in those ways, even though to the vehicle that you had before you came on this task, even though it was generations away from those things. It could still, if thrown into them, it could still give in to them. It's like you take a civilized man and who has order to his life. He has only one wife. He has no affairs. He's trying to play it according to the rules. But you take him and let him spend some time in a primitive group in some jungle or some island someplace where orgies are the common thing. And first he goes in very objectively and he's writing them down, and the next thing you know, he's getting into a little of the fun. And the next thing you know, he's writing home about some of his secret friends about he's found the greatest thing he's could ever find. He's indulging in things that were rightfully a part of his extreme past. And it was very, very dangerous for him to let his eyes go see those things again. Now, it was very, very dangerous to your next level mind to come and see these things. But how else can you develop security in the next level than be thrust into things that could have a pull at you? And you say, oh, wait a minute, I've grown out of those things. I can handle those things, even occupying a vehicle that wants to respond at that level. That's the reason we can say you must still like certain things or you wouldn't be doing them. And you can take the cop out and say, not me, my vehicle. I'm sorry, if you have done it repeatedly, you have slipped into liking it along with the vehicle. You have been that permissive of it. And it was extremely beneath you to give into something that was so beyond even where you were. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't recover ground and get back and come back to your senses. Do you follow that? Because you can. Now, am I saying too much?
No. What's so, what Doug said about what you were troubled with or you had a weakness for prior to this task, it is not acceptable once you do this task and you build your new mind. Do you know what I mean by that? In other words, you have only a blank spot. In other words, you won't have this desire.
They won't even be in this computer
Right.
that your head is going to go
It doesn't
into.
compute at all.
And if you're so preoccupied with the things of the kingdom level beneath you, because you're going to be in a vehicle that all of these things will be a kingdom level beneath you. And if you're still so preoccupied with those things, you're going to be pretty stupid. Because there's not going to be much mind occupying that vehicle. Because they can't get in. Those thoughts can't get in.
There's no place for them at all. So, take this into consideration whenever you have a response or your vehicle tries to con you into it. You've got to really work hard on, and you ought to examine whether or not you like it. your next level mind likes it. And this is why you're really still doing it. And if you're, if you realize that's what it is, then you've got to, your mind has to program your mind.
Yes, the better part of your mind's got to say, now, come on. Let's get back where you belong. You know better than this. You know that you can't regress so as to get a charge out of things as behind you as that. Do you know what we mean by behind you? As distant from you as that? Now, I can see so clearly why the next level would even choose to prepare you for this vehicle by putting you in vehicles and into a civilization that would try with all of it had to pull you back thousands of years. Because only after you sustain during that period of time the effort that it takes to warp those things off and to constantly pull yourself above them and stay above them and short circuit and everything else just to keep your head above water, it's preparing you to have a healthy operation for that new mechanism. And I can't believe that any of you like the things that you still let your vehicle get away with. I know darn well you don't like it. But I'm talking about the whole you. But I know that still there's some little pockets in there that still kind of get a charge out of some of those things. Still get, does it mean that much? That's what you've got to come to grips with. Does it mean that much to you? It's like somebody, let's take an alcoholic who isn't a bad alcoholic. I'm a very minor alcoholic. Minor alcoholic meaning somebody who doesn't really get soused or doesn't lose his job, but he feels like he needs alcohol on a regular basis. But even though he may not recognize it, because he'd still laugh it off. But let's say that he begins to realize that the regular use of it, like he does, makes him at certain hours of the day when he's accustomed to using it. During those hours, he's not really qualified to do everything he could do with his mind just because of the little bit of drinking that he might do during those periods of time. And also he recognizes that certain health symptoms of his vehicle are affected a little bit by just a little, because he's become more sensitive. In other words, he's an intelligent minor alcoholic. And then he pretty soon comes into his senses and he says, does it really mean that much to me? Does it really mean that much to me? Am I willing to ward off the hangover, even though it's not too bad when nobody even knows I have it but me? Do you follow what I'm saying? Nobody even knows I have that hangover but me. Nobody even knows that I'm a little high but me, because I've learned to cover. That's what a minor alcoholic, no, he knows exactly how to cover. No one could tell that he was ever a little bit high. He knows his performance isn't, that he couldn't do what he needed to do at all times. Let's say he was called into duty to fly his jet at 9 p.m. and he'd been having cocktails since 6, but never got wobbly. His speech never got stammery, or whatever you call it, slurred, and no one, they would all swear he was sober as a judge, but he himself knew that he could not handle that plane in the way that he could had he not had an ounce of booze in his head. And the same thing about the next day. Now, pretty soon he has to wake up and say, is it really worth it to me to do this to myself? Even though I have justified it in that I never drink enough to be affected. Nobody knows. My performance is never affected. And he could honestly say it was true. But yet his standards would get higher. And as they got higher, he could recognize that he could do more with that time if he did not have that thing. So he finally has to say, does it really mean that much to you? Now, Does it really mean that much to you to let your vehicle get its beef off? If that's one of the things your vehicle likes to do. Or let your vehicle get away with its sensuality, or whatever it is. Does it really mean that much? Is it really that satisfying? Because you maybe better decide if it's so satisfying to you.
That we only cover a handful of things. We go over the same thing over and over and over again. And if you stop and look at really evaluate it, you could probably count them on one hand, how many things we have actually covered. And it's true, we go into detail more and the understanding becomes greater, but I feel like when we hold meetings, we're talking about the same things that we were talking about in Campground.
But with more depth and
but
more
you
oversight.
have a greater understanding. You are not what you were way back then. I wouldn't insult you in that way. And we can talk to you more straightforward. We can say to you, we can talk to you more as members of the next level than we ever have
We
been.
can say a lot of things to you we certainly couldn't have said to you then because you didn't have enough mind in.
But the information is almost identical.
Okay.
The basic part of it. And it's good that you realize that.
You know, I can remember when, I don't know if you all remember, but probably some of you do, when we were talking to you about how some members of the next level had a molecular structure that didn't have the same kind of adhesive qualities to it that the molecular structure of the human body has, that would permit them to appear to go through things and be solid form on the other side of it. And then we went through a period of thinking maybe that was a little too far out, a little too fantasizing, and yet it's once again it's so extremely real to think that the scientific physiological advancement of the next level, now I see it from a very simple standpoint, that they would have the capacity to, in a very easy way that they've known about for a long, long time, in a very easy way, separate molecules of almost any compact group of molecules and move them from one place to another, that molecules that were tied to each other could not move in the space of time that they could move separate molecules and change the character of those molecules. Now, we don't think that this is true only of vehicles like the one that you will go into, but even of objects, things on a spacecraft, even the craft itself, even like probably one of the prerequisite qualifications for the materials chosen to put together on certain items would be that they were molecularly separatable. If they needed to be transported from one place to another with extreme haste for any reason, and it's like a human would call transmutation. You know what transmutation is? Something reappearing in another place, just as if it's exactly the same thing, disappearing from one place and reappearing at another place. And yet it seems so simple to me that they're capable of doing it. I wouldn't be the least surprised to see an older member in an older member vehicle walk through almost anything. Now, there are probably lots of varying limitations. Like probably the vehicle that you have wouldn't be able to walk through the spacecraft wall. Do you follow that? Because there would be all kinds of limitations where you would probably be able to walk through certain things, but not through other things. Other things would have to have probably a ray put on them to separate the molecules so that you could walk through them, if the job required that you walk through them.
Well, those kind of walls, you wouldn't have to walk through. But you've got to...
No, I'm just telling you this for sake of getting your head twisted, because believe it or not, you think that you think way out. But a lot of you still think in very restricted, limited ways, and you think that one thing means something else instead of realizing that once you move to the other thing, it has a whole new set of rules and limitations. It doesn't necessarily mean that it would apply to all aspects in that area. I don't know if that made any sense.
Anything on this garden, I would think that older members could come through any wall simply because of the difference with these.
With techniques. With
techniques. Now, once you get your new vehicle, don't you all try walking through walls first.
Or you bump into one that wasn't meant for that.
Because it's something that you have to grow to be able to do. And it's just...
and some of it may have to be done for you.
Right, until you learn how to do it. But these are the things you will learn when you get into your new vehicle. And this is why we say you're stepping into something that is more interesting than you have ever experienced. You thought when you graduated from a garden that it was really fantastic. But this, what's ahead for you now, far surpasses anything that you have ever experienced. And it doesn't just stop at the entrance. It's really just the beginning, the first step. So you really have something to look forward to. And if you keep that in mind, it will spur you on to really do the best you can while you're here so that you will be strong when you go to the next level and you go into your new vehicle. I know that the joy that I feel from after all the time that I have spent at the next level, I know that what I will be able to do when I get back will be greatly improved. Same way with Stowe, and I'm looking forward to it. And sometimes I get impatient and I want to hurry up and get the show on the road, and I get impatient for you all because I know how anxious I was when I was doing what you're doing, and therefore we want to hurry you up and get you going as fast as you can. It isn't a purely selfish reason on our part, because we don't think that way. We're thinking about all of us getting this task accomplished, doing it the best that we can, and completed it as quickly as possible. So put all your energy into it. Say, Mother?
I don't know if it's appropriate, but in line with what we've been talking about, I had some things in my mind when I was thinking about the new vehicle, and when we were talking about spaceships, spacecraft being the same as labs, using terms interchangeably. A long time ago, I think to spur us on or to get our thinking to be more expanded, you mentioned, well, at least what I remember, I may have it wrong, but you mentioned things like planets possibly being spacecraft or planets having a consciousness of some sort. And another time you mentioned something like spacecraft evolving as maybe as a type of vehicle off the planet that was had a whole metabolism that was metallic or some such thing. And if you remember,
What was the last thing you said?
Like as though it were a creature that evolved in vehicle line that was coming out of mercury or some kind of metallic environment or something like that.
I don't remember that, but I do remember that and it's very possible that the planets are spacecraft. And
well, see, but this, when we say spacecraft, to your brain, it may not be at all what you think when we say that these planets are spacecraft. To us, anything is a spacecraft that is under the control of the next level and is used by the next level in actual functioning ways. And it has to us be a spacecraft. It's the thing that we know is not true is that those bodies are up there just arbitrarily floating around, waiting for their time to come to burn up or burn out or have green things growing up. That they have more significance than just waiting for their time to come to either deteriorate or to come into life.
Well, they all have a function, otherwise they wouldn't be set up in the way that they are set up. Like Saturn's rings. Why would a planet need something like that? It has to serve a function, it has a function of some sort. Just logic alone you can reason that out, at least I can, very easily. It makes a lot of sense to me that each one has their own little characteristic, and their function is very individual.
And not very simple.
It's like,
what's
the difference in having something like that and a farmer having fertilizer to put on its plants in its garden? And in a sense, that's the way the next level uses the planets and what the humans call planets.
I can't help but think that a lot of them serve multiple purposes, too. I feel like sometimes they serve as relays for communication and for signals that are sent from much greater distances.
Warehouse.
In other words, that if you're going to send a certain kind of nutrition to the planet, it would work best if you bounced it off of such and such a planet in the solar system, where it would glance at a certain time in relationship to Earth and to have the best effect. So, we know that we're not just talking in vague theoretical terms. If your brain is seeing it that way, it's only because you don't see how technical and advanced the next level is. Think how advanced a human language is of a scholar to the language of a dog. Okay? And just make a rough comparison to the scholar who, to the human scholar with all his little PhDs and all his knowledge of how to work at NASA and so forth, and realizing that that's very primitive to the next level, extremely primitive. So those aren't dummies going around them. But what permits them to have such advancement is the nature of the behavior of their vehicle, the control and the rules that govern working with each other, and how the civilization, if you want to call it that, of the next level, the patterns and rules, that's the best word I can think of, that civilization in the next level operates under. And those rules are very, very tight, and that's the only way things can really work. Don't you know down here how chaotic it is if a city or a nation has no rules, and people just go destroy each other haphazardly and go their own way, and this sect is knocking off that sect, and this, they're just things like that. So you should appreciate that the only way that world can work is to be 1,000 times more disciplined than you are at your best moments. But the thing is that your best moments during this transitional period are preparing that vehicle for the capacity of real discipline and real control. Right on cue.
When we made our commitment tonight, what you said about our strain, helping our strain, we must have concerned with the next level at that point.
That's right. Cannot help but relay down to them they will be faced with that. Some were probably faced immediately. Others will be faced as it works its way down the path of your strength. But something in them is going to respond with a greater committal toward goodness, toward improvement, toward more control, and even toward their interpretation of the older member that is their keeper.
Right, and you were talking about how we are going to be taught.
Might even be prosody. Dead serious. Dead serious, because when you all get back, your very next task might be very, very closely related in follow-up from a distance. You know what we mean by that? And follow-up to see that the seeds that you planted to participate in the ways that will be your capacity to participate, to see that they occur. Excuse me, go ahead.
That would be fun. Well, I thought you were saying that...
Not down here, by the way. Not follow-up by running around again. No. Huh?
What did you mean, might be prosody?
Well, when we said, and even this committal that you were talking about makes them have their own interpretation of a committal to their older member, which could in turn be one of you, because you are the most immediate connection with that strain, are you not? Okay.
Well, you were talking about, I remember right, about the course. It was like, in order to bring the planet up, the garden up another notch, that we might be having to, was it work with this garden? And I was thinking at the time, well, isn't that what we're doing right now, is helping to bring it up a notch? But you had something else that you were talking about that would bring it up another level, and I can't...
Well, I remember something T said about that the likelihood would be very strong. She wasn't saying it would necessarily be so, but the likelihood would make a lot of sense that your next tasks would put you in a position of, from a different advantage point, bringing up the ones that you've had an influence on at this time, which is this planet. You know, so.
But see, just because you go into the next level, your work with this garden has not stopped.
So you got a transfer or reassignment or something.
In other words, you will step up and continue working with this garden on a different level altogether. Meaning you will step into next level vehicle, and the responsibility that you have will change from what it was prior to this. And it's very likely that you will have contact with this garden in some way. But it doesn't mean that you will remember anything about this garden other than the experiences that you had.
For your sake.
For your sake.
Because that would be an interference.
Because it would be very difficult for you to be objective if you remembered. And so you've got to remember that, well, when I get back to the next level, I'm going to see that such and such happens because of such and such.
You would have to carry the humanness in your brain with you into your consciousness, which would pollute your consciousness.
Would it work like the identity does when it goes into the new vehicle? It doesn't really recall what happened, but it has that experience.
That's right.
But you would follow rules anyway, according to what you're taught. You wouldn't do anything on your own. What was that alert?
If we were thunderstorm warning and flash flood watch for Tarrant County and
In Denton County? Okay, so it's good.
Whatever you see. What's that? Okay.
Maybe question. Sorry, this study.
Are we ready? Melody?
Sort of a question. When I'm at my out-of-class task, it feels like people that I'm kind of responsible for what they're doing, it feels like they pull energy out of me. Does that, if it gets really bad, it's like I'll feel like resentful. But I don't feel like I'm giving people energy. It's more like, in order for people to do things, you kind of have to push them sometimes, things like that. It can take a lot of energy, and I don't know if I'm doing something wrong. I don't know how Lynx would handle that.
Well, if you're pushing them, and that's causing you to spend some energy, that usually doesn't hurt. The kind of that loss that you shouldn't allow to happen is when they involve you in a way that with their conversation and their response they want from you for things drain on you. And you've got to recognize that and pull away from that and be a separate person. And a lot of people will think that you're cold and unfriendly if you pull off, and then they'll learn later that you're not really unfriendly, you're just more of a separate person. But if you let, it's common for humans to come in close and pull from your energy by the questions they ask, and in unspoken ways they want certain responses from you about things they say, and they've got, soon they'll learn that you don't give them what they want. You give them what you want to give them. And it may occur to them and it may not occur to them. But in that way you have to protect yourself. But if you're pushing them in order to get performance out of them, only if that pushing them then makes them turn around and draw from you in a personal way would it bother you. But if it's just the energy that it takes to push them, it shouldn't matter.
What you want to do is be aware of how much you give to them. In other words, you may be giving them more than what you're aware of. I know when this vehicle was working, I would give so much, and at the end of the day, it was completely depleted. And until I realized what I was doing, and then I had to stop it. I had to give only so much. In other words, that's
had to be protective of
right.
your energy.
You have to protect yourself. It's like when we go out somewhere and let's take little old people, for instance. Little old people drain very much because they want something from you, not consciously. And we just have to back off from these little old people. Not that we're rude to them, but we have to kind of prevent them from drawing from us. In other words, we will talk to them, and that's about it, but we won't spend any time with them.
Children can be a terrible draw. Immature people can be a terrible draw. People that have no restraint about what they say or what they would say to you, they're a terrible drain. And like T says, you have to, this goes back to what we said earlier about your task out there is just bread and butter for your main task here. And you've got to, we think that you're all, because you don't spend the energy as most humans do, and you're not so concerned with when the next coffee break comes, or when you're not letting your head dart back and forth from your out-of-craft task to how's my date going to be tonight, or how am I going to pick up the kids at the soccer game, and you don't have all those things. So we feel like you can keep an out-of-craft task performing very well, and yet not overspent. If you learn to do it, you've got to learn to do it, and just stay above it. If you get really down into it and get involved at the level that your vehicle would if it were in that same task, if you weren't in this class, then you're getting into it too much. You follow that? Did that make sense?
You just want to watch how much energy you give to them as far as helping. In other words, you want to allow them to push themselves. You don't want to push them. If they are in that position to do that task, then they ought to be able to do it without your pushing them. And that takes a lot of energy from you. So what you want to do is just kind of reevaluate everything and see if maybe you aren't giving too much.
And keep that evaluation going several days so that you've kind of checked out all the areas of your relationships and performance.
Talking an awful lot drains you.
Having to give an awful lot of instruction.
Right. And if you can get it down to where your conversation is almost as little as possible, then you'll find that you won't be so drained at the end of the day.
We know that certain aspects of this are very hard for you, like tuning into the mechanism of the technical mechanism of the way humans do their tasks. That's very, very hard to tune into, and that's why when you have to stay close enough to it that you don't have to spend the effort to get back into it. In other words, stay close enough to it that you still understand the principles behind the techniques of what you're doing, because, like, let's say, for example, in melodies or shorties or orthoties or families, that kind of tasks, if they pulled out of them for a couple of weeks or a month or something and then had to go back, and during that time they just let all that slide and they just forgot about it, the effort that it would take to get back into it is hard. So you have to kind of keep a little space for staying there. When, for example, we got this telephone for a Z-car, and this human tried to tell us how it works, and he talked about like Cerroti would talk, computer talk, mile a minute, using all the terms that like showing off, even though he didn't think he was showing off, but and just going lickety-split and saying, oh, you just do this and do this, and to me it didn't make a bit of sense, the demonstration that he gave, because to me the only way you can give a demonstration would be to hand the telephone to the person who's going to purchase it and say, now, to do this, you push so-and-so and so-and-so, and you do this and you do that, and have us do all the little features and do them maybe several times until we knew what we were doing. Well, he didn't have the patience to do that. And the book, whoever wrote the book of instructions, is ridiculous. I mean, the book is just, it's terrible because it doesn't cover anything. Now, the funny thing was, not long ago we got a piece of equipment and got an instruction book with it. I can't even remember what it was right now. Can't remember what it was. But I remember remarking to T that these people knew how to write an instruction book. Because but if you read all the way through the instruction book, they had, on nearly every chapter, they also covered the things they had covered in previous chapters. So by the time you got through the instruction book, you had been briefed on each thing about a half dozen times. And they had said it in different ways and had related it to everything else. And for a human, they had really done a good job. They'd approached it all from all these different angles. But this instruction book on this telephone almost assumes that you were the one who designed it. That's just about the way it is. And even the sentence structures, it all has double meanings. You know what we mean? It just, but you've got to watch as you work with humans to, like if your task requires that you know these technical things, like a lot of your tasks do, you've got to have a little place there where you keep kind of sharp in those areas, because you could lose them very quickly, because they do not jive with next level type thinking. They just simply don't jive. It's like mixing oil and water. And it's hard, isn't it? Don't you all? Isn't it? All right. Yeah. Okay, we'll spend enough time on that.
More questions? Anybody?
Something you said in an earlier tape made me wonder about something. You said, I think it was in response to a question about whether we'd always have a connection with you, and I believe you said that what you were giving us now would be adequate to have a connection with whatever older member picked us for a task, and that triggered a question in my brain of whether you had more than we perhaps had thought about in the past, had more to do with picking us for this task, or whether we were, we were just the ones that were ready, and they said, okay, the two of you go with these, or whether you were actually involved in picking from the pool of available ones to do this with. I don't know.
I don't think so. I think what do you think?
Well, my logical mind says that we probably didn't, but my unlogical mind, my subconscious mind, because of certain responses that I observed T having to some of you all, made me, and responses that I know I have had to some of you. I must admit that it's almost like I knew some of you well enough before we came on this task that I had seen you demonstrate a certain performance level, and I almost get just completely put out with you when I don't see you pulling it through your vehicle, a performance level that I feel like you're capable of pulling through your vehicle. And that's the way it appears. There may be no truth to that.
Well, I believe that, and I could be wrong, but I believe that we knew you very well. But I think his question was, did we pick them?
I don't know.
Because we knew, like Joe said, we feel like at times that we wonder why you don't get your mind into your vehicle better, or exert the effort enough. Like I wish we could open your mouth and reach in your throat and pull out the real you, because we know that you can do better than what you're demonstrating. We know that there's a blockage there with the vehicle and the mind. But we also know that we cannot do anything for you other than what we're doing.
But we do feel like sometimes when we sound like we're just, really just getting put out with you, it's because we feel like you are, like what we are expecting of you is so simple to you, and that you know very well how to do it if you would just break the block of the vehicle that you're in. Now, and it's gotten us in hot water a few times. Because we have come down on some of you at times to the degree that you just couldn't handle it, and we just had to back way off. And that's what caused us to analyze why it is that certain ones we feel so compelled to just. It's as if to say, don't you remember that? It's like, what in the world are you doing? You know how to do that. You know how to communicate on this level with us on matters of this type. Do you follow that? And because that's the attitude we have. And poor class member on the other side's going on like, oh, you know, what, why am I getting singled out? You know, why am I catching it? But that may or may not be the reason. We do know that it is not. We're not tuning into the human expectations of your vehicles. We're not tuning into whether or not your hometown or your degree or your educational upbringing prepared you for what we're expecting of you. That we're not. We just don't tune into that. So it's there has to be something to it. Some subconscious awareness that our minds have of what we feel we can expect of you at times. So when you feel we are coming down pretty hard on you at times, in a sense you ought to feel good about it.
There's a little question on one of these games. This was last night.
On what?
A game show, and it had to do with, I guess there were some psychologists or something were talking about what if love could be learned or if it was, or you just had it. And the answer was that you just develop it. There's nothing about it. You just either have it or you don't have it. And I didn't think that was true. And I was just wanting to ask you, because I was thinking that all the things that I'm learning, like you taught me patience, or at least made me aware of it, and caring for others, and on and on and on and on. And all those together, to me, is what the term love means. And so I just wanted to throw that out there and see if that's true. Or
Well, what kind of love were they talking about?
I think they were talking about
They might be talking about chemistry.
chemistry.
Well, I don't know.
Were they talking about chemistry? See, all these heads think they're talking about
Well, I
chemistry.
thought they were talking about the kind of love that you care for another individual, or care about things around you.
But
You
but
had that
see, most humans primarily are talking about, are you turned on by someone?
Let's
They do.
say they get turned on, they get married, and then they get turned off, which happens after people get married. Then they have to develop a caring for each other,
Concern.
which is probably what they were talking about, because it happens just about in every marriage. But in other words, some won't even admit it to themselves that they have lost interest in their mate. But you look at the husbands and wives as you drive along in the car, or when you're in contact with the husband, looks like he's bored to death. Just bored to tears. And if they have any children, it's almost like the wife takes care of the kids and the husband sits there like, what did I get myself into? You know, that type of thing. And when he realizes how unhappy he is, then he might, just might, get counseling and then realize that he has to work on developing a love, a different kind of love. But it's really crazy.
Instead of
It just
expecting it
doesn't
to
work.
just go on at the adolescent infatuation stage of blissful ignorance, you know. And, well, that's right, because humans, most of the ones who bounce from marriage to marriage, all they really want is that ignorant attraction. You know what I mean by ignorant attraction? It's the attraction that is only there because you don't know enough about them. Right? If you knew a whole lot about them, about half of it would dissipate. If not more than half of it would dissipate. But the chemistry thing, we feel like is a genetic thing. It's like a person's package of genes as a package will characteristics that add up to, and because of its weaknesses and its strengths, to being strongly attracted to another package. And that is interpreted as what a human would call just falling in love. And but relationships based on that, 99% of them just aren't worth a darn. They're just the only thing they've found is good chemistry, and they're extremely lucky if they have enough in common of interests and concern and activities that they can have a workable relationship. Otherwise, it'd be better just stay away from each other entirely, except for chemistry.
Well, that whole question also made me think about what I'm learning. And is it true that I have a hard time saying that word, love is something that you learn? Like, I'm learning next level love. I'm learning all the things that add up to what humans would, or humans don't even call it love. I'm adding up to what it really is. It's not even something that you can describe.
It isn't chemistry.
No, it isn't chemistry. Well, humans would say that you like something that is when it's caring and respect and those qualities, that they usually apply the term love to where the primary characteristic of attraction is chemistry. You follow that? Now, but as you're growing, you begin to like things so much that like begins to feel like a weak word for it. You follow? And so you then apply a stronger word, because the words are so limited, of you really have grown to appreciate those characteristics so much that you realize that they're the only thing you really love, because that's where you can see that nothing else could you really care for to that degree. You follow that? And but these are ways. That's why we said the last time that the key word when people were rewriting some committal, we said is ways, because when you see the way that when you get back to the next level, when you see the way every older member thinks and performs and has learned to look at things and do things, and the ways of the next level, when you see them demonstrated, you'll have such a pull toward those ways that nothing would mean anything to you except those ways. Now, little by little in the task that you're doing, little by little, you begin to hate certain human ways and like certain next level ways. And now your package is bigger on the next level side than it is on the human side, because the mind is more in control of the vehicle than the vehicle is in control of the mind. If the vehicle was in more control, then the package would be bigger still on the human side. But the more the mind comes in, the more, and the weaker the vehicle is, the more you like, or you're capable of recognizing and appreciating the next level ways, and seeing them for what they are instead of misinterpreting them at the human level. Because you can see these ways demonstrated and look through eyes at the human level and misinterpret every one of them. You follow that? It's just like if humans watched the ways we do things and how we would perform in many, many circumstances, they would totally misinterpret what was going on, because they would see it from their own eyes. They would have to judge us by how what they would be thinking if their response seemed to be similar to ours at that moment.
Any others?
One reading you said that every strata was looking for the next strata up for instruction and what they were to do. And I was wondering, from the graduate level,
You mean still having a human vehicle?
Yeah, would the graduates be the ones that sort of work with the humans, because they'd be ones closest to the humans, that doing things like, taking samples or taking them on big press and examining them or whatever it is? Would that be their role, or what would the graduates, what would they do?
Well, being newcomers, most of them are, what comes first, level 1 or level 3? Level 1. What do you do mostly as a level 1? It's just about the same, except that if there comes tasks where contact has to be made, where it's too harsh for the older member, it might be easier for the graduate to be asked to step in and do that contact. We think when you read, like in some of the UFO literature where they say there were humanoids on the craft, plus there were some others in different kinds of vehicles that probably tasks, they were using graduates to do a portion of the task. Excuse me. Go ahead.
There are usually, you find at least one older member on a spacecraft where it's dealing with sample taking, or where they would be taking